something I had dreamed about, but never in a million years would have thought right now or 6 years ago, I'm ready. Let's do this.
Hello readers, I'm Victoria Wood and you're listening to Biblio Happy Hour, the show that shares new book releases, we chat to the authors who write them, and the people who sell them. Every week, we'll share some of the new books that will be hitting bookshelves that week. We'll invite an author or two or more on the show to talk about their debut or newest release, and we'll introduce you to an independent bookseller and their bookstore so you can stop by, get tailored book recommendations, and pick up some new books when you're in town. So make space on your bookshelves, follow us on social media, and make sure you're subscribed to Biblio Happy Hour wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Readers, Biblio Lifestyle is a newsletter, community, and space for people who can't live a life without books in it. Every Friday, you'll get a special treat in your inbox filled with inspirational content, book recommendations, self-care tips, original interviews, and things we think you'll enjoy. The best part? You'll only receive one email per week, and it will be an amazing 5-minute read or less. So if you're not on the list, sign up now for our free weekly delivery at bibliolifestyle.com. I've included a link in the show notes so you can sign up there. This week, I'll be chatting with bookseller Annie Jones from The Bookshelf located in Thomasville, Georgia. We'll be talking about her bookstore, the town of Thomasville, what readers can expect when visiting her bookstore, and how she got involved in the bookstore business. Annie, thank you so much for coming on the show and welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you here as well. Before we get started with the interview, really quick, are you a coffee or a tea person?
How bad is it that I'm neither?
Oh, it's not too bad, but what do you drink? What floats your boat?
Well, I guess as a true Southern person, I'm a Coke drinker. But in general, not a coffee or a tea drinker.
Oh, wow. That's quite interesting. Not even sweet tea?
No, especially not sweet tea. I don't like sweet tea at all. So that's why the Southern thing is kind of weird. But I do like Coca-Cola, but I do not like sweet tea at all.
Okay. Well, Coke is fine with me. Alrighty, so let's get into some details about the bookstore. Tell us where you're located, and if you don't mind, share a bit about your town.
Yeah, so the bookshelf is located in, I say on our podcast, beautiful downtown Thomasville, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Our town is a pretty small southern town, between 18 and 20,000 people, and that includes some of the rural areas. So we are located in a vibrant downtown that's full of coffee shops and restaurants and boutiques, and our downtown is walkable, which is a great feature and very helpful for our bookstore. So we attract a lot of tourists, and we also have a really loyal local following. So part of what makes our store so special, and I think most independent bookstores so special, is the communities in which they're located. Thomasville is a city that's really devoted to the arts, to music, to storytelling, and you can tell they really care about the power of story. So we are very fortunate to be located in Thomasville.
Tell me, when did you guys actually open the bookstore?
So the bookshelf has been in existence since 1982. My husband and I took over 6 years ago. So the store was already in existence, had a loyal following, and certainly was kind of a staple of downtown. We just have the privilege of getting to make it even better.
So give all listeners a visual. What can readers and book lovers expect walking in for someone who's never been to Thomasville, or now hopefully they'll consider passing by and stopping through, standing at the front door before they walk in? Give us a visual. What can readers and book lovers expect?
So immediately when you enter downtown Thomasville, it kind of looks like your typical quaint, I think, Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls town. And then, so you'll see, this tree-lined street and lots of other lovely shops. But when you open the door into the bookshelf, it's very bright and airy. We're a little bit different in that our shelves, and I never noticed this until I guess I took over the store, and then I started really paying attention to other bookstores.
Mm-hmm.
But our shelves don't line the wall. Instead they come inward, so it creates some nooks and crannies there. But really, it's less of a nook and cranny bookstore and more bright, open, spacious. The store used to be, way back in the 1800s, a bowling alley. And you
Wow.
can tell because it's kind of long and skinny. So the first half of the store is adult books and gifts. We do pride ourselves on a really good gift selection. And then as you meander back, we have a little area where we sell coffee and tea and chocolate, and then we enter into our children's section. So we kind of split the store half and half adult and half children's, all new books, new products, very light, bright, and I think a really fun place to be. And I really hope that comes across from the moment you walk in the doors.
But
Uh,
a little bit more about you, Annie. Again, you took over the store 6 years ago. Was this something you always planned to do, or did an opportunity just present itself and you're like, yep, I'm going to run a bookstore?
I think it was probably a combination of both, meaning when I was 13, I mean, I've told this story a lot, but I saw the movie You've Got Mail and knew, like, I was like, oh, that's a dream job. Like being Kathleen Kelly and leading story times and running a bookstore. That's a dream job for me. That I would love to do that. But I went to school and got my degree in journalism, which I'm very grateful for. And so it was one of those things. I think people who really knew me knew that was like a far off, maybe even retirement kind of dream.
Mm-hmm.
So I told people, I think their gut response was, sure, that makes sense. But now, like, really? Like, so, and that's kind of how it was for me too. It really does feel like the opportunity presented itself. It's something I had dreamed about, but never in a million years would have thought right now or 6 years ago, I'm ready. Let's do this. I definitely would have thought it might be something I do, yeah, after retirement or after kids or yeah, the timing isn't something I would ever have envisioned. And I think that's how the people who know me best also felt. They were really supportive, but I
Right.
think they also were like, right now? You're going to do this? We're going to do this now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I guess I don't know. It's somewhat life, and life happens, and you never know what's around the corner. And I guess for you, there was just that bookstore waiting right around the corner.
It really did feel serendipitous. And there's a song I love, and it's better be prepared to be surprised. And it's just so true because the opportunity kind of came out of the blue. And I talked to my husband Jordan about it and worked at the bookstore then for a year and then pursued owning it. And it was one of those things where we ultimately decided to say yes. And sometimes I think you're just presented with those opportunities where you have to decide, am I going to take this risk? Am I going to take this leap? And I'm grateful we did.
Yep, yep, yep.
Good.
But wrapping up, what would you like everyone listening to know about you and your bookstore? What do you want everyone to know about the bookshelf in Thomasville, Georgia?
I think what I want people to know is in a world where it is easy to be anonymous and it's easy to interact on Instagram and send emails and send direct messages. And all of those things are really positive and great. But don't forget that there are people behind those screens and that there are people working hard at your local small businesses, whether it's a bookstore or anything else. There are people who are human beings who are trying their best to make their communities better, hopefully, if you make your community better, you're making the world a better place. We are a group of hardworking, dedicated people who are trying our best to carve out a space that is safe, that is kind, that is open. And we're trying to do that both online and in our store. And that's what I really want people to know is that there are, and I think that's special about the bookshelf, but I don't think we're the only ones doing that. I think there are independent bookstores and small businesses all over this country trying to do the same thing. And so when you can, and if you can, if you're financially able, support those spaces. Go to those coffee shops, eat at your local restaurants, visit your small businesses, like posts on Instagram. I mean, the algorithm is messed up and weird, and
I
really a
know.
lot of businesses I think are struggling. And so comment, like posts, like even if you can't afford to purchase anything, share bookstores and small businesses stories. And I think that's what I'd want people to know. We are a hardworking group of people dedicated to making our community the best place it can possibly be, and that's online and in our small town.
Absolutely, absolutely. Annie, thank you so, so much for taking the time out and coming on the show and just talking about your bookstore, books, and just general small business in the bookish community. We really appreciate it.
Yay, thank you so much for having me.
Readers, you can connect with the Bookshelf in Thomasville, Georgia at their website, bookshelfthomasville.com. And you can also find them on social media on Facebook at Bookshelf Thomasville and on Instagram, Bookshelf Tville. If you'd like to tune in to the rest of my conversation with bookseller Annie Jones, you can find the full podcast episode over on our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/bibliofinder. To find an independent bookstore near you or when you're traveling, visit bibliofinder.com. Bibliofinder is a new online directory for independent bookstores. They help users to find bookstores worldwide based on their current or planned location. If you're on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, please tag Bibliofinder in your indie bookstore photos. Now, I will be mentioning some of the books that will be available on bookshelves during the week of Monday, January 6th. And I'm thrilled to have Sean Adams, Marie Benedict, Claire McFall, and Sandra Dallas on the show to talk about their new books. New this week from Random House is The Violence Inside Us, A Brief History of an Ongoing American Tragedy by Chris Murphy. New this week from Riverhead Books, Long Bright River by Liz Moore. In this novel, two sisters travel the same streets, though their lives couldn't be more different. Then one of them goes missing. New from Eco Books, Summer Snow, a poetry collection by Robert Hass. This is a major collection of entirely new poems from the Pulitzer Prize and National Book Award winning author of Time and Materials and The Apple Trees at Olema. Also new from Eco Books, A Collective Bargain, Unions, Organizing, and the Fight for Democracy by Jane McAlevey. New in paperback from Hanover Square Press, By Chance Alone, a remarkable true story of courage and survival at Auschwitz by Max Eisin. Also new from Hanover Square Press, First Cot by Judy Melinek and T.J. Mitchell. A hard-nosed medical examiner, a suspicious case, and an underworld plot only she saw coming. New this week from Harper Books, The Gimmicks by Chris McCormick. New in paperback from Harper Paperbacks is Grace is Gone by Emily Elgar. New from Harper Perennial, When Death Becomes a Life, Notes from a Transplant Surgeon by Joshua D. Mesrick. New this week from Mira Books, The Country Guest House by Robin Carr. This is book 5 in Sullivan's Crossing novels. New this week from William Morrow Books is The Heap, and we have the author Sean Adams here with us to share all the details. Sean, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here to chat a bit about The Heap.
Oh, absolutely. And we're so excited you're here and you could make time for us. So your debut will be available on bookshelves this week. You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you and just how are you feeling?
I mean, I'm super excited. I'm a little nervous, but mostly excited. I mean, this has kind of been a dream of mine for a while to have a book out there in the world. So obviously a lot of intense feelings right now. But yeah, mostly pure excitement.
Right. But tell us about your novel. Tell us about The Heap and what readers can expect.
Yeah, The Heap is basically, the way I would put it is that it's a literary satire. So it's going to have some elements of more of like, kind of an absurdist novel, but then also some elements of science fiction, some elements of kind of more straightforward literary fiction. Basically, it's about this city called Los Verticales. It's an enormous 500 stories tall city that's fully interior. So it's like a whole building where there are condos, restaurants, businesses, and it's in the middle of the desert, it's in the middle of nowhere, and it collapses. And there's only one survivor, which is the radio DJ who kind of worked the local radio station within Los Verticales. It's also called the Vert. That's what they, that's like what they call it inside. And the only way they know he survived is because somehow his equipment has survived as well. And he's basically still broadcasting from a dark hole somewhere in the middle of this giant pile of rubble of the collapsed Los Verticales, which is called the Heap. And the story actually follows his brother, the DJ's brother, Orville, as he's like basically digging for his brother, and he gets kind of caught up in this conspiracy with a radio station. There's elusive billionaires. There's kind of a whole society basically built around kind of clearing up this rubble that was Los Verticales. And so basically, it's a very strange novel, but I think it's very funny as well. Like working on it is like, some people would ask me, when does this take place? And I actually think that I think an alternate universe is a great way to put it, because it does feel a little bit like it is now, but there are certain things that they have in this world of the book that we don't have, and there are certain things that we have that they don't have. Like there are no cell phones, there's no real internet, everyone still listens to the radio. There's all of these things that kind of seem archaic, and yet there are also kind of a lot of futuristic science fiction elements as well.
Right, absolutely. So now I'm curious, and I know after hearing all that just now, my listeners are probably curious too. How did you come up with the concept for this novel? What was your inspiration?
It's funny, that's one of those things that I always feel a little silly about, which is, that I don't necessarily pull my story ideas from the news or anything. A lot of the time it's just a funny idea I had, and I'll take it and I'll play around with it. And then if I can start to kind of piece together, it's like if I can build characters around this concept, if I can kind of build a world and build some tension, I'll kind of expand from there. So if I'm totally honest, it just started as this idea kind of a long time ago about, a radio DJ who's stuck underground, continuing to broadcast. I just thought that was an interesting conflict, and then kind of, an interesting, funny sort of weird concept for a plot. And so I basically started from there, and then slowly, over the course of some time, I've kind of added more characters, kind of figured out some more kind of plot mechanisms for that based around that.
Okay. So who would you say is your favorite character in the novel?
Oh, so my favorite character is, he's actually a fairly small character. He's not a small character, but probably Charlie. He's kind of, not to give away too much, but you meet him first, and he's a telephone decommissioner, and he has a very peculiar way of talking that was really delightful to write and really fun. He basically he's incredibly stern and incredibly kind of forceful in the way he speaks. So he was probably my favorite character to work on. I would say my other favorite would be kind of there's this group, so they're called the Displaced Travelers, and they're the people who were all away when Los Verticales collapsed. And they're this kind of this strange little gathering of people, and they're basically a cult. And they're constantly kind of working on this document to chronicle their lives inside Los Verticales called The Later Years. So I would say that group as a character is actually probably my favorite. That group and Charlie were two of my favorite characters to work on.
Absolutely. So if you didn't write, what would you do as a creative pursuit?
That's an interesting question. I think what I would probably do is I would probably, I'd probably try and do some sort of comedy performance, or I would probably, maybe draw. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be a cartoonist. I would read the newspaper comics, and I'd always want to, it's I would want to try and make up my own Calvin and Hobbes strip, or I'd like to draw single panel comic strips The Far Side and stuff like that. So that was kind of also those were my other That's my other creative pursuit, but I gave that up. I don't really draw that much anymore, except a random doodle here and there.
Okay. So tell us about the last book that you just finished reading.
Cosmology of Monsters by Sean Hamill, which I really enjoyed. It's a monster novel that's also kind of a family saga.
Okay. But getting back to The Heap, how do you want readers to feel after reading this book?
Like what I want the book to be fun. I guess that was like my goal all along. I wanted to write a fun, pretty exciting book, something that kind of moves, something where there's like big plot twists and big, like big scenes, big reveals, those sorts of things. And so I guess like that would be my hope. My first hope is that when people read it, they think, wow, that was fun. There's a part of me that wants, there's significant elements to it. I feel like there's commentary, in kind of like in the portrayal of Los Verticales, and, there's this whole thing about like the units with windows and the units without windows, and kind of, and then like within Campertown, there's sort of this, or Campertown's where all of the people live now around the ruins. There's elements of like some political commentary and some commentary about capitalism and some commentary about, it's like who we choose to be our heroes and who we choose to, dictate things, and like why that's problematic in certain ways, and but at the same time, I don't want people to come out of it feeling like they've just read a political manifesto. I'd rather have people come out of it feeling like maybe they just read a kind of a weird Coen Brothers movie as a book.
I like that. Awesome. Sean, thank you so much for coming on the show, everyone. The Heap will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, January 7th.
Thank you so much for having me.
Readers, you can connect with author Sean Adams over on Twitter, and you can find him at Sean Adams. You can also tune in to the rest of my chat with him in our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page. He shares more about his work schedule when writing and his writing process. We talk about his favorite childhood book, what he's doing when he's not reading or writing, and the writing projects he's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New from William Morrow Books, Naked Came the Florida Man by Tim Dorsey. Also new from William Morrow, Hunter Killer, a Pike Logan novel by Brad Taylor. New in paperback from William Morrow, Where Have All the Boys Gone by Jenny Colgan. Also new in paperback, No Sunscreen for the Dead by Tim Dorsey. New this week from HarperCollins Books, Paris Dreaming by Katrina Lawrence. Paris Dreaming is the ultimate chic, personal, and charming memoir, not just for women who love Paris, but for anyone in search of that elusive good life. New this week from Atria Emily Bestler Books, Deep State by Chris Haughty. In this white-knuckled, timely, and whip-smart debut thriller, a deadly plot against the president's life emerges from the shadows of the deep state. Also new from Atria Books, House on Endless Waters by Emuna Elon. In the tradition of The Invisible Bridge and the History of Love comes an exquisitely moving novel about a writer who discovers the truth about his mother's wartime years in Amsterdam, unearthing a shocking family secret that becomes the subject of his magnum opus. New in paperback from Gallery Book Saga Press, The Light Brigade by Cameron Hurley. This is a science fiction thriller about a futuristic war during which soldiers are broken down into light in order to get them to the front lines on Mars. New this week from Sourcebooks Landmark is Lady Clementine, and we have the author Marie Benedict here with us to share all the details. Marie, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Well, thank you so much for having me. You guys are such a wonderful force in the world of readers, and it's just a delight to be here today talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much for your kind words, and we're so happy to have you here as well. So, Lady Clementine is your fourth novel, and it will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
Oh, over the moon. I mean, to use a phrase that Clementine would have really enjoyed, definitely over the moon. It's such a delight and honor to be able to tell these women's stories, these really important historical women. So the chance to share the story of yet another one of these really key figures in our unified past is really a gift. So I am definitely over the moon.
So tell us about your novel. Tell us about Lady Clementine and what readers can expect.
Oh, wow. Where shall I begin? This definitely was a novel that turned out to be a lot more of a historical dive than I really expected at first. But in short form, I would say Lady Clementine is the story of Winston Churchill's wife, Clementine Churchill, and the incredible, important role that she played all the way starting in World War II through the 1930s, through World War I, through the 1930s into World War II, in which she was the woman not behind the man. That's a really commonly used phrase, but really the woman beside and in front of the important political figure, Winston Churchill. She was there not only to guide him, to advise him, to help edit his speeches, all the kinds of things you might anticipate but might not have realized that she actually did. But she also had her own list of endeavors, a lot of which focused on advocating for women and women's roles, rights, movements, and those sorts of things are definitely things about her which weren't known. So it's really her story and the pivotal role that she played in those decades that are so key to modern history.
What inspired you to write Lady Clementine, and give us some behind the scenes details? Why this woman?
Oh gosh, why this particular story? Well, I think I have to back up for a second and say I have like a laundry list of ladies that I would like to write about. Doing what I do, I feel like I've kind of developed an antenna over the years for these really important historical women, and so I've kind of gathered this enormous list of them, and I find them everywhere. I find them in references in books. I find them in other people's stories. And in this particular case, I found, not that she was really in hiding, but she's not well known. I found Clementine and her stories when I was doing research for my prior book, The Only Woman in the Room. And as I was researching that particular book, in which I was kind of knee deep in World War II research, of course, I kept coming across references to Winston Churchill. All the work that he did, but the ubiquitous cigar, the figure, the man himself. And I started to wonder, where is his life in all this? He is omnipresent, certainly during World War II, but he's pretty much all throughout European history, World War I, and into the 1920s and 30s. And I knew he had had a long-standing marriage, but I knew nothing about it, really nothing about her. And so that question kind of prompted me to dig a little deeper. And once I got going and sort of unraveled the story of this incredible, bright, very strong woman, I knew hers was the story I wanted to tell next.
Absolutely. But on the note of characters, who would you say is your favorite supporting character in the novel? Obviously not the main character, but who would you say is someone that, either caught your eye, caught your heart? Who's that character?
I would say in the book, probably Eleanor Roosevelt. I mean, it's funny to think of Eleanor Roosevelt as a supporting character in anyone's story, but she is a supporting character in Lady Clementine. Clementine and Eleanor come to know each other quite well. Their husbands are allies during World War II. And they're married, they're in these really unusual positions of being married to two of the world's most powerful men at a time period when the world is really in enormous conflict. And there's no one besides each other that can really understand the weight that rests upon their shoulders. And the way that they speak to each other, the way that they kind of bond with one another, the way that they learn from one another is really powerful and moving. Just as one example of the kind of shared knowledge that they have between them. When Eleanor first comes to London, and it's also Clementine's first time she's actually meeting Eleanor in person, they spend several weeks together kind of touring throughout England, and Clementine really wants to show her what the British people are suffering. But she also wants to show her their spirit, in particular the spirit of the women. And she takes her through all of these, whether they're canteens, factories, military compounds, and she's kind of demonstrating to her what the British women are really doing. And Clementine was really instrumental in making some of those things happen. And that's such a huge lesson and takeaway for Eleanor. You know, she really talks about the strength of the British spirit, and it kind of motivates her to start in the U.S., who's just entering the war at this stage, to start some of these key programs for women and involving women in the war effort, which is really important for women's future. And, you know, Clementine, who's really at her nature, at her core, a very shy person, who's really had to learn the skill of speaking in public, motivating people. It's not something that comes to her naturally, but it is something that really comes naturally to Eleanor Roosevelt, or at least appears to Clementine. Mm-hmm. And she really studies Eleanor and the way she deals with the public and the press, and she learns a tremendous amount about how to carry herself. And she really becomes a popular figure in both America and England. And she really learns how to woo the reporters and woo the press. So it's really a fascinating relationship, a fascinating interchange that really, I think, has long-lasting ramifications in both England and America.
Wow, that's quite interesting indeed. When you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
Thinking about reading or writing. That probably sounds crazy, but it's true. I mean, it's you know, I'm so fortunate to have a job that I love, that plays to all of my passions. You know, what did I do before I read and wrote for my job? I read for fun. And I traveled to historical places, which is what I've always loved to do. So, you know, those are still my abiding passions. And so really, as my so-called leisure, I'm also kind of always working. But aside from that, obviously, I do have time when I'm not doing those things, and I really love spending it with my family. You know, my kids are 11 and 13, and they're at terrific ages, and to kind of dive deep into their world and the things that they're passionate about, whether it's soccer or physics, that's really where I am right now.
Right. And if you didn't write, what would you do for work or as a creative pursuit?
Oh, wow. That's such a great question. You know, I didn't start out as a writer. I actually was a history lover, went to college, was a history major, thought I'd become like a history professor and archaeologist, but I kind of got waylaid and ended up going to law school. And I was a commercial litigator in New York City for over a decade before I published my first book. And I could return to that world, I suppose, but one of the reasons I was drawn to writing is because I knew that the law wasn't for me. But I think, you know, the skills that I learned as a lawyer, kind of culling together facts, putting together a narrative, and then advocating for that for my client with that narrative, those are skills I use every day in my writing about these women. You know, these women are kind of my clients, and I've constructed a narrative that I advocate on their behalf. I think I'd probably do something like that, utilizing that skill, but in a different way. If I wasn't writing books and I wasn't a lawyer, which is probably what I wouldn't be, I might consider doing some sort of advocacy work on behalf of women or on behalf of artwork. Those are kind of my two passions afterwards. But really, I hope I don't have to think about it. I hope I will be continuing to write books about historical women until I'm a historical woman myself.
Yes. I like that. And yes, we definitely, I know for me personally, I love your story. So we definitely want you around to keep sharing these stories, unearthing, you know, all these stories of these wonderful historical women.
Thank you so much for saying that. That's why I do what I do. The idea that people would step into these worlds and not only have a little bit of time travel, but see themselves in these women from the past and really learn from the sort of timely issues that they're dealing with, or understand the way in which their contributions kind of live on into our present day. I hope it's both inspirational and hopefully instructional, you know, as well. I learned a tremendous amount, and I pick women who are dealing with things that I'm dealing with.
Right, absolutely. So part of this podcast is about independent bookstores and indie booksellers. Yes, we love them very much, and we love having the booksellers on the show. So share with our listeners some of your favorite indie booksellers and indie
Well,
bookstores.
before I do that, and I have many, many, many favorite indie booksellers, I have a small announcement, maybe you already know, but I do have to give a shout out to all those fabulous independent booksellers because Lady Clementine is going to be an Indie Next pick for January 2020.
Yay!
So, to be recognized by all these independent booksellers and to be selected for the Indie Next award is so huge to me. So I just want to say thank you to all the independent booksellers who not only, really named me for this award, but also continuously sell these wonderful, important stories about women. So I had to just digress and say that because I'm just tickled about it. I have to say probably my number one favorite indie bookstore is the one that's in my town. I live in a historic, no surprise, town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And my favorite books, we have a wonderful small independent bookstore in my town, and it's called Penguin Bookshop in Sewickley. And they've just been incredible champions of my work. But one of the things I've really learned how to do through them is how to really partner, how authors can really partner with their independent booksellers. And, I have them when I do any event, really anywhere within driving distance, they come with me and they sell books. When someone comes to town that's going to give us a speak, I will push for them to come and make a visit to Penguin Bookshop. If somebody comes, I may invite them to have a conversation with me. So I really look at my relationship with indie booksellers in that way, as we really have a partnership. I'm so fortunate that these bookstores want to sell my books, hand sell my books. And I feel so lucky that they're in all these communities. So, I've really learned from that partnership, that relationship I have with Penguin Bookshop, and I try to do that in the other cities that I go to. And very often I'll return, like I'm going back to Page and Palette in Fairhope, Alabama for this book, Litchfield Books in South Carolina. There's a lot of bookstores, Foxtails in Atlanta. There's a lot of amazing independent booksellers that I love to return to time and time again as part of that sort of partnership I really feel like I have with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. But getting back to Lady Clementine, how do you want readers to feel after reading this book?
I want them to look back at our history, especially those pivotal key events of World War II that have really shaped the political landscape that we live in today. And I want them to see the women. I want them to see that Clementine and all the women that she helped empower played a huge role in the Allies' success during World War II. And I want them to ask themselves, where would we be but for the women? And then I want them to ask that question everywhere else in their lives too.
Absolutely. Marie, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank
show.
You.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I loved having you on. And listeners, Lady Clementine will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, January 7th.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's been a delight and a pleasure.
Readers, you can connect with author Marie Benedict at her website, authormariebenedict.com. You can also find her on social media on Facebook and Instagram. You can also tune in to the rest of my chat with Marie in our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page. We talk more about the kind of research and her research project for Lady Clementine and her other books, what her work schedule is like when she's writing. We talk more about her writing process and how publishing her first books changed her process of writing. And we also talk about some other writing projects she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and you can tune in to the rest of our conversation. New from Sourcebooks Landmark, Mixed Doubles by Jill Mansell. Also new from Sourcebooks Landmark, Welcome to the Pineaway Motel and Cabins by Katerina Bivald. New this week from Sourcebooks Fire is It's My Life by Stacey Rami. This is a swoon-worthy romance about a girl who needs to make peace with her past before she loses out on the future. New in paperback from Sourcebooks Fire, A Danger to Herself and Others by Alyssa Sheenmill. Also new this week from Sourcebooks Fire, The Last Witness. And we have the author Claire McFall here with us to share all the details. Claire, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, absolutely. We're super excited to have you. So I know this isn't your first book, but The Last Witness will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
Oh, it's really excited because it's a story from where I'm from in southern Scotland, and it's just so nice to I've been coming to the States for 13 years, and just nice to bring something from home to America for people to read. I'm kind of nervous about how they react to it, but hopefully it'll be good.
Alrighty, so tell us about your novel. Tell us about The Last Witness and what can readers expect?
Yeah, great. Well, it's a paranormal psychological thriller, I guess. And the main protagonist is a girl called Heather, and she has just finished her 5th year of high school, which would put her in 11th grade, I think. And at the end of the school year, she and a lot of her friends are just looking to unwind. So for Dougie's birthday, they go to a beach for a camping trip, and there they climb a hill and they find a cairn at the top, which is a burial mound from the Iron Age, where the sort of head of the tribe would be buried at the top of the hill so he could kind of survey his land in the afterlife. And they steal something, and they awaken a spirit within the cairn, and well, things get a bit nasty, and it starts to pick them off one by one. It's actually told in 2 timelines. So we've got now and then, and the then is Heather retelling you just what happened on the beach. And now it's Heather with Dr. Peterson, who is a psychiatrist who is looking after her and who believes that she murdered all her friends. And in the book, Heather is trying to prove to you that she's innocent.
Oh, okay. Sounds really exciting. So what inspired you to write this book? Give us some behind-the-scenes details.
It was an actual camping trip on the actual beach. The beach is actually called Ardwell Bay. But the publishers decided, first of all, it was called Blackburn Point in the UK, and now The Last Witness in America, and both those sound much more exciting than Ardwell Bay, I will concede. But we went there, me and my boyfriend, who is now my husband, and I'm not really a camping kind of person. I'm kind of a hotel person, maybe indoors. I like the outside from the car.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a Scottish thing because it rains so much. And so, but, my husband is from Colorado, very outdoorsy, and he's like, try camping, go on. And I suppose, we hadn't been going out that long, still trying to impress him a little bit. So I said, right, okay, we'll try. So we arrive on this beach, having broken down on the way. So if you read the book and you get to the bit about the Volvo breaking down, everything that happened in it happened word for word, including the part where he turned to me and said, "You're a girl, you can flirt. On you go." But then we got to the beach, and he gets up and he's like, "This is amazing. There's no one from Mars. We're all alone." And I get out and I was like, "There's no one from Mars. We're all alone. We're going to die." And those kind of horror movie slasher things,
Yeah.
where people are camping and the knife goes in the tent and it reaches down and they die a horrible, bloody, painful death.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I felt the whole time we were there. And I just thought, this is a place to set a horror film or book if you're ever going to. And so that's what brought on the whole story.
Oh, wow. It's quite an interesting experience indeed. But who would you say is your favorite character in the novel?
I really like Heather's the main protagonist, and I really like her, the way that she's trying to deal with the situation and the way that she's trying to stand up to Dr. Peterson, because he's obviously trying to convince her that she's done this horrible thing and trying to almost browbeat her into believing it, and she's standing firm to him. But I've also got Dougie is the love interest in it, and he's such a sweetheart, and he's the kind of boy I would have fancied at school. And just like Heather, I'd have been too shy to talk to him because I was a bit hopeless. So I kind of got a soft spot for him too. Okay.
So getting into your writing process, how long did it take for you to write The Last Witness?
I'm a pretty fast writer, so I would say maybe about 12 weeks to write the first draft. I tend to say to myself, right, you have to write 1,000 words today. But actually, and that kind of seems insurmountable at the start, but once I get going, if my kids are at nursery, to be fair, then I can maybe write up to 6,000 and I really get into it. So I tend to just kind of, vomit the first draft onto the page, and it comes out really quickly because it's the most enjoyable part for me.
Oh, okay. So when you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
I try to run. I'm not very good. I'm quite slow. And I spend a lot of time running after 2 small children.
Yeah, that will definitely give you a lot of cardio chasing them. All right, so what's the last book that you finished reading that you would now recommend?
Oh, I think it's The Twisted Tree by Rachel Burgess. And I actually met her at a really cool sci-fi literary festival called Chimera in Edinburgh. It was just new this year. And she was talking about books, and I was like, that sounds so interesting. I have to read it. It's really cool. It's about the Norse gods, and it's set in Norway, which how cool is that? And it's about a girl who's partially sighted who goes out and kind of discovers her heritage and her destiny. And it's really quite freaky, and it's really fast-paced. And I guess it's quite like The Last Witness in that kind of way, and I really enjoyed it.
Okay. So tell us some of your favorite indie bookstores.
Well, I am literally just fresh off the plane, so I haven't found any where I am yet, but I'm in kind of Thornton, which is North Denver, so if anyone knows any in the area that are good, I would love to find out and go and visit. You can tell me on Twitter or find a way. I've got a website and things. But from back home, I'm from the Scottish Borders, which is kind of south of Edinburgh, and the indie bookstore in my little town of Peebles, which is where I used to teach and where I used to live, it is called Whitey's, and it's tucked away down a little alcove. It's in an ultra cute little street. And it sells loads of little interesting books, but also it was one of the first places to sell my books and to tell readers about my books, and so I've got a really soft spot for them. So Whitey's Bookshop in Peebles would be one, but there's also an amazing bookshop in Newtown, St Boswell's, which is kind of award-winning and has got a really nice little cafe in it, and it's called the Main Street Trading Company, and it's super cool too. They're both in the Scottish Borders, which I know is far away. But if you happen to be visiting Scotland, and people do, and you go to Edinburgh, which most people do, take a trip south, because there's some amazing stuff, like there's some old abbeys and things. The countryside is really beautiful. There's even a train line now, so you don't have to drive, and you can find both those bookstores down there. We're really not far.
Oh, right. Awesome. So getting back to The Last Witness, how do you want readers to feel after reading this book? What reactions are you hoping for?
It's really hard to explain this without giving away what happens at the end of the book, but I want them to be gobsmacked.
Okay.
And then go, what? And then go back to bed.
Okay, sounds good.
And I'm saying no more.
Claire, thank you so much for coming on the show, everyone. The Last Witness will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, January 7th.
Exciting!
Yay! Readers, you can connect with author Claire McFall at her website clairemcfall.co.uk. You can also find her on Facebook and on Twitter, and her Twitter handle is @McFall_Claire. You can also tune in to the rest of my chat with Claire in our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page. She shares more about the first book she wrote. We talk about where she gets most of her writing done and how publishing her first handful of books have changed her process. We talk about her favorite childhood book and other writing projects she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New this week from Grand Central Publishing, Quality Land by Mark U. Kling. Also new from Grand Central, Hindsight by Iris Johansen and Roy Johansen. In this novel, investigator Kendra Michaels, whose former blindness has left her with uniquely insightful observational skills, must put her life on the line to catch a terrifying murderer, setting his sights on some of society's most vulnerable. New in paperback from Grand Central, On the Bright Side, The New Secret Diary of Hendrik Groen, 85 years old, by Hendrik Groen, translated by Hester Velmans. Also new in paperback from Grand Central, The Martian Chronicles, by John Freed. New in paperback from Bayback Books, Fall Back Down When I Die, by Joe Wilkins. New this week from Seal Press, Average is the New Awesome, a manifesto for the rest of us, by Samantha Matt. New from Disney Hyperion, Scavenge the Stars, by Tara Sim. Packed with high-stakes adventure, romance, and dueling identities, this gender-swapped retelling of The Count of Monte Cristo is the first novel in an epic YA fantasy duology. New from Catapult Books, Before and After the Book Deal, by Courtney Malm. New this week from Tin House Books, The Magical Language of Others, by E.J. Coe. New from Grove Atlantic, Why We Can't Sleep, Women's New Midlife Crisis by Ada Calhoun. Also new from Grove Atlantic, Wilmington's Lie, The Murderous Coup of 1898 and the Rise of White Supremacy by David Zucchino. Readers, if you need a more tailored selection of books to keep on your radar, or you want to hear more from your favorite authors that we've had on the show, become a patron at patreon.com/bibliofinder. For $1 per month, you'll get our monthly top shelf recommendations of new releases that we're super excited about. You'll also hear more from your favorite authors in our off-the-cuff discussions. You'll get our full Meet the Bookseller podcast episodes, get bookish-themed Instagram templates, plus lots more. That's patreon.com/bibliofinder. I've included a link in the show notes so you can sign up there. New this week from St. Martin's Press is Westering Women, and we have the author Sandra Dallas here with us to share all the details. Sandra, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Thank you.
So, I know you've authored so many books, fiction, non-fiction, adult, YA, but this is your new novel. It will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
Oh, I'm really excited because I love writing about the West, and I love writing about women. I think some of my best books have been about Western women. One was The Diary of Maddie Spencer, which came out a number of years ago. The West was an exciting place for women. It was a very difficult place for them because it was a time of sphere of influence, and women left behind the things that were important to them: family, religion, school, and faced a very uncertain future. But they were up to it, and they loved the freedom that it gave them and the sense of responsibility. It's no accident that women in Wyoming were the first to have the vote, and Colorado was second, because it was hard for men to say, it's okay for you to work beside me in the field or in the gold camps, honey, but God forbid that you should be allowed to vote. So women did get equality in the West earlier than elsewhere.
Oh, okay. So tell us about your novel. Tell us about Westering Women specifically, and what can readers expect?
Westering Women is about a group of around 40 women who head west in 1852 as brides to men in a mining camp in California. Actually, many of them aren't interested in finding husbands. They have reasons to leave. They have secrets that they've left behind. One's been beaten very badly by her husband, and she fears that he will kill her. Another is a prostitute who wants to change her lifestyle. There's a young schoolgirl who is pregnant by a school teacher and knows her parents will throw her out if they find out about it. Another woman is extremely wealthy and has financed the trip. And in exchange, she wants to go on the trip and take her servant with her. It's kind of a quid pro quo. So they all have different reasons for going west. And they run into a lot of the traditional things: cholera, Indian attacks, weather-related problems. Eventually, the men who accompany them fall by the wayside. They leave for whatever reasons. And so in the end, only the women and the two ministers who have sponsored the trip are left with the wagon train, and they have to go on, and the women have to do all the work themselves.
What inspired you to write this novel? What was the spark for you? I know you mentioned earlier you love writing about women and you love writing about the West, but what propelled this particular story?
I think it goes back to when I was a kid and used to watch Western movies. The women were always helpless, and I knew that women did more on the Overland Trail than simply stand there and scream when they saw the Indians. And I wanted to write something that really showed what women did. In a way, it was like that Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire joke that women did everything, that Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, only backwards and in high heels. The women did everything the men did, only in long skirts, and they were pregnant, or at least 1 out of 4, roughly, was pregnant. And it was a very challenging situation for them, and they rose to it. So I wanted to write about women like that.
Right, absolutely. So who would you say is your favorite character in the novel? Or if not your favorite, just someone you related to, you admire. Who's your favorite character?
I think my favorite is a character named Pennsylvania House. And when I came up with that name, my agent said, "What?" But I liked it. And Penn is my favorite. She's literally escaped from a very abusive man. And the women take her on partway through the trip. She's not one of the original ones who signed up. And they're very protective of her. But with their encouragement and their love and their support, she becomes much more confident in who she is and changes from this cringing, abused woman into a very powerful character. The character I like a lot is Mary, who is a very large, unattractive woman, very powerful. She's run a farm and never found a husband in Illinois where she's lived. She operates the farm for her brother and is treated like a hired hand. She becomes the leader of the women. And because of her, they make it. Without her, it's questionable.
Wow. What kind of research did you do prior to writing this novel or research during this novel? And how long did it take to pull the whole book together?
The book took quite a while because I started out with a cast of thousands. And my agent kept saying, no, you need to focus. And I had to kill off characters. And it's really hard to kill off characters because they're very real to you. I did a certain amount of research, but I've lived in the West and I've written about it for a long time, so I know a lot about the Overland Trail. But it required me to read a lot. It seems like everybody who went west kept a journal, so I read journals and narratives and recollections that many of the early pioneers kept. And that was really the best source of information, more so than the traditional histories. Although I had to do a lot of research into what life was like on the Overland Trail, what the trail itself was like.
Getting into your reading life, what would you say is your favorite childhood book?
My favorite is a book called Smiling Hill Farm that my older sister loved, and I ended up inheriting it. It's about a family that goes west to, I think, Indiana, not very far west, but they establish a farm, and it's about 3 generations that live on that farm.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you've been reading about the heading west, not even though it's not the West, but heading west for quite some time now, it seems.
I pretty much grew up with the idea of Westering. My favorite movies were Westerns. I read books about the West, and of course, we lived in the West, and we would go to ghost towns. And when I was first married, I lived in Breckenridge, which was then just a mining town that was becoming a ski area. And I worked for a national news magazine, and I covered hard rock mining, so I knew a lot about the subject.
Right, absolutely. So what was the last book that you finished reading that you would now recommend?
I read all the time, and I just finished 2 books. One was Death Comes for the Archbishop, Willa Cather's book, that was written almost 100 years ago. We would consider it filled with cliches and racist, but it is so beautifully written, and it holds up so well. The other book I read was The Last Thing You Surrender by Leonard Pitts, about racism and prejudice in World War II, which is very moving. Another book I just finished was American Dirt, about a woman whose family is murdered by a drug cartel, and she's forced to leave Acapulco and come to the U.S., and she can't take a bus or a plane. She has to simply go north by walking or by riding that awful train called the Beast. Mm-hmm. And it tells you, no matter how you feel about immigration, it certainly tells you why people want to come to the U.S.
Right, absolutely. So when you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
We have a house in the mountains, and we spend a lot of time up there. I have a grandson who is right now asleep in the basement, and we spend a lot of time with him. I don't really have hobbies.
Okay, sounds good. Tell us some of your favorite indie bookstores.
Oh, well, obviously the Tattered Cover in Denver, which is everybody's favorite bookstore. But Colorado's lucky because it has so many independent bookstores. There's Old Firehouse Book in Fort Collins, and the Hearthfire in Evergreen, and Covered Treasures in Monument. Another favorite of mine is the King's English in Salt Lake City.
Alrighty, sounds good. But getting back to Westering Women now, how do you want readers to feel after reading this book, or what are you hoping for?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, I hope that when they finish the book, they feel they haven't wasted their time, that they've enjoyed reading the book. I'd like them to get out of it the feeling that women are competent, that women can do what men can do, that they are human beings to be admired, and particularly that Western experience when there was so much prejudice against women. Women were able to overcome the circumstances in which they found themselves. Today, we would be appalled at what women put up with. I also want them to get a sense of what 19th century women were like. Today in fiction, we have an awful lot of Western women characters who are wearing 19th century skirts, but are really 21st century women. They love Indians and stand up to men, and they're newspaper editors and lawyers and that kind of thing. It's what I call the Dr. Quinn medicine woman syndrome. Mm-hmm. They're great role models, but they're not exactly accurate. And I would like to think that my characters are a little more representative of that time period.
Sandra, thank you so much for coming on the show. Everyone, Westering Women will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, January 7th.
Thank you.
Readers, you can connect with author Sandra Dallas at her website, sandradallas.com. And you can also find her on social media on Facebook at author Sandra Dallas. You can also tune in to the rest of my chat with her in our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page. She shares more about her writing process and her work schedule, where she gets most of her writing done, how her process has changed since publishing her first handful of books, how the publishing industry itself has changed, and we also asked her about other projects she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New this week from St. Martin's Press, The God Game by Danny Toby. In this novel, 5 ambitious high school students find their lives at risk when a video game that thinks it's God won't let them quit. New in paperback from Flatiron Books, The First Conspiracy, The Secret Plot to Kill George Washington by Brad Meltzer and John Mensch. Also new in paperback from Flatiron Books, The Night Tiger by Yangtze Chu. New from FSG Books, The Black Cathedral by Marcial Gala, translated by Anna Kushner. New this week from Picador Books, Mothers, a story collection by Chris Power. New in paperback from Forge Books, Midnight at the Blackbird Cafe by Heather Weber. New this week from Minotaur Books, In the Shadow of Vesuvius, a Lady Emily mystery by Tasha Alexander. This is book 14 in the Lady Emily Mysteries series. New from Tor Books, Lady Hotspur by Tessa Grattan. Lady Hotspur has been described as a sweeping, heart-stopping novel of betrayal and battlefields and destiny. New in paperback from St. Martin's Griffin, The Girl He Used to Know by Tracy Garvis Graves. Also new in paperback, Butterfly by Ashley Antoinette. Also new in paperback from St. Martin's Griffin, Daughter of Molokai by Alan Brennert. Readers, I hope you enjoyed today's show. A list of all the books mentioned in the show will be available over at bibliohappyhour.com. To shop all the books I've mentioned in the show and to find a bookstore near you or when you're traveling, visit bibliofinder.com. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, please let us know at Biblio Happy Hour and tag us in your post over on Instagram, also at Biblio Happy Hour. If you enjoy listening to our podcast, please share Biblio Happy Hour with your favorite bookish friends, share us on social media, and please leave us a rating and review. Don't forget, Biblio Lifestyle newsletter subscribers are the first to know all the podcast happenings, get free goodies in the mail, and they can enter for a chance to win some free books. So if you're not on the list, sign up now for our free weekly delivery